Welcome to Jesism. Today we will be discussing some comments that I've recently received. There's a gentleman who is asking some very incisive questions, and I think that giving them their due day in court will be of great use to you, my listeners, and to anybody who comes across it. So for all of those reasons, we will be addressing those questions point by point. There are 5 total questions. So I'm joined today, thankfully, by Darren.
Hello.
And Daffney. So the beauty of having, friends here is that we're not only going to be able to answer the specific questions of the commenter, but we're going to be able to build like a communal, conversation around what does or doesn't make sense and how we feel about, everything that's said. And the idea here is that what sort of withstands that dialogue is something that you can consider for yourselves, just as we consider, or you two consider, just as you two consider, and I consider what you say, to be either beneficial and reflective of reality or in contradiction with it. And so we rely on your judgment, just as we rely on our own to examine life. Right? Yeah. So usually almost all my videos include like a segment of meditation. I'm making this whole video up as I go. I wasn't even planning on including that, but it occurs to me now, we're all we're bringing our own thing. You worked earlier today and you were not expecting to be in a video, and I have made zero preparation and vaguely on the spot. And so perhaps it would be beneficial to sort of take a moment to give some permission to the things that we brought to this conversation to fade away. Because there is a certain amount of sanctity to this conversation, because thanks to the comments I've received, it pertains to very sort of fundamental matters of life that if we take seriously may be of great benefit to us to refine our understanding. So perhaps a little quiet, like say 3 minutes-ish? 2 minutes sound good to you? 2 minutes? Okay, let's do that. And that's all for now. So I have here on this whiteboard a list of these 5 questions. Do you two have anything to contribute at this time or not? Darren, anything you want to throw down in this juncture?
Not right now, no.
Okay. Let's wait to stir it up a little bit first. So I've written these down so that they're painstakingly clear. Actually, I'm going to ask you, can you be the whiteboard guy? So we just need to go up and down, right? Make sure it's visible.
Would it be easier for me to hold?
If Darren's closer, I think it's okay. Just go ahead and hold it like right before I go up to the thing like that. Okay. So, obviously impromptu. So let's bring it down. Okay, so the first, anyway, Y'all see that? Okay, good. So, that's, grab your beer. So, the first question is, could you explain the core principles of Jesism? So I kind of want to see, I want this like visible to me so I don't stray off topic too much, which I have a tendency to do. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, great. Okay, so to reiterate, after all that, the question is, could you explain the core principles of Jesism? So do you two have any questions at this point in time? Okay, so let me share with you what Jesism is. Firstly, right? So, Jesism is a set of insights into the fundamental nature of life and a set of practices to help one arrive at and sustain that awareness. So that's Jesism. And the reason it's called Jesism, and I've received some criticism from people, calling an ism after yourself or something, you're not supposed to do that. The reason it's called that isn't because it belongs to me or that I invented it. I did not invent it. It's the least original ism ever. There's the least original thing in the world. The laws of this table and the laws of your hat and the laws of your nails are all articulate the basic fundamental principles of Jesism. So they don't belong to me. They're not specific to me. What is specific to me is that I would say that I have noticed these principles to abide by certain patterns via insight, and that having ascertained these patterns or having recognized these patterns, I noticed that there are not so many people around me who also recognize them with the same level of depth, and that lack of recognition has terrible fallout in terms of not recognizing who they love or don't love, not recognizing what their motivations are or would be or could be or should be, and so on. So that's what Jesism is. And the reason it's called Jesism is because not many people get it, right? And the other reason it's called Jesism is because I'm idiosyncratically with my personality and whatever it is, that makes me me, right? And the person teaching it. Just as if you, Daffney, were teaching it, it would be called Daffneyism, because you, with your particular proclivity for music and things that, your hair, all the things that make you you, would be the instrument of education, just as to me the table is an instrument of education. And that way it's universal knowledge, right? So that is a long-winded way of explaining what Jesism is, okay? So I've already then alluded to what some of the core principles of Jesism are, right? But let me try to tackle it in a kind of succinct way for you guys. And anytime there's questions, pop in, right? Because that's what keeps life. But I can talk the whole time too. So the core principles of Jesism. Let me first say that I haven't articulated or written them down yet, because I know them, but I'm still determining how to communicate them, because the core principles of Jesism are so radically alien to what I would call an uninstructed person. So for somebody going about their normal life, doing their normal things in their normal way, that the core principles of Jesism are so radically alien that they're in fact essentially unrecognizable to that person. Just like if you were to hand, say, a Native American in the year 1000 AD a car, it would not come across as a means of transportation, especially if it didn't have gasoline and somebody had to go get gasoline for it. It would come across as something unfathomable, maybe a demon, right? Could be a bad thing or a good thing. And so I do not want there to be any confusion about what it is that I'm teaching. And so for that reason, the safest way not to confuse people is to not articulate what it is that you're actually teaching. However, I really appreciate this questioner's line of inquiry, because of course, what's the point of teaching something if it doesn't have core principles? I've made over 200 videos, you know that, Daphne, I've made over 200 videos that sort of work around the flesh, the atmosphere of this matter. But I have very deliberately avoided the core for the reasons I just laid out. So it's really good that this person asked. It just so happens that quite deliberately I didn't prepare for this at all, like basically zero. So it's a good opportunity for me too to bring words to something that's wordless. Let me throw a few things out as a matter of contemplation rather than nailing down the core points yet. One point is that reality is deceptive. That means words are deceptive. That harks back to the propensity for things to be confusing, right? So what I consider to be good or bad is subject to change at any given moment depending on many different conditions, such as what I ate or what I did. It's a fact that judges acquit more after lunch than before. That's because they have a full stomach. Okay, so if somebody's life is determined by how big their sandwich was, you can imagine how much of our reality is subject to conditionality outside of our control, right? So that brings up another point. These aren't the core points. These are, I'm sort of trying to dance around until I find what I'm going to say, right? But that brings up another core point, which is that things, this is so obvious, but not well recognized. When a thing happens, there's a result. And when that result occurs, a further thing or things happen, okay? Now what that does, and that there's nothing is out, another point that might sound a little more radical is that nothing exists outside of that. Is that everything on heaven and earth and hell is subject to conditionality. Things come about, they evolve, and they terminate, resulting in the birth, maturation, and death of the next thing. We made a video where we were wearing sunglasses in the sun, and we talked about that very same thing. So conditionality, as I understand it, or as I'm expressing it, to be something which nothing exists outside of, is one of the closer to the core points of what I'm talking about, right? And again, since I didn't have time to prepare, I'm kind of throwing darts, but hopefully the darts are useful. Hopefully, right? Okay. So we have conditionality, cause and effect, and we have ineffability, which is that things are deceptive by nature, right? But now I see, those things are not exactly the point. The point may be this, is that due to that ineffability and due to that deceptiveness and due to other conditions, there arises a sense of offness. This is sort of the subject of what I'm teaching. There arises a sense of offness. And what that means is that the situation you or I are in right now feels not quite right. It's a simple, it's almost a sensation in the stomach or in the heart or in the mind, in the brain area. So now's a good time to open this up, right? So to you guys, because I can already feel, watching the body language and watching the things, going on and listening to myself, that there's a certain amount of traction lost, and it's very important to maintain that traction, right? So you can see I'm hitting darts around the bullseye, and I'm trying to pinprick it here, somewhere real close to the bullseye, where I say that there's a state of dissatisfaction, which is a constant, meaning every microsecond of life is constant harassment.
So, I think you said earlier you don't have the core principles of Jesism clearly defined as of yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Not defined for you. For me, they're a natural operational procedure, like walking. If you try to explain to somebody how to walk, it will create quite a foolish scene for that person, right? Like people who, physical therapists have to teach people how to walk because they didn't know because it was so reflexive or so natural, automatic. And so, in the same way that somebody knows how to walk, I know the core principles of Jesism, but in articulating them, particularly in connecting that with other people, it's quite a challenge. But I'm up to the challenge. But it requires, or it will certainly benefit from a certain amount of mixing of our minds. But is not required. So, well, let me ask you this: what time in life is free from friction? When does that moment arrive? Like a real moment, like some moment, you know, like when you won a trophy or something.
It's like right before I go to sleep.
Okay.
That's free to free. I don't have to do anything other than sleep. You know what I mean? Like I'm not obligated to do anything. You know what I mean? Like you just go unconscious.
Do you not reminisce on the day before you go to sleep and then have?
I do kind of do that. Like maybe I'll daydream. Yeah, sure, I'll do that. You know, maybe I'll play an imaginary scenario in my head. You know what I mean? Before I go to sleep, I think everybody does that. But yeah, I think that answers. What would you ask again? Like what time?
What moment is free from friction?
Free from friction. Yeah, like for me, it's like when I'm turn off all the lights and I'm in my pajamas in bed. You know what I mean? In the dark, underneath my blanket. That to me is free of friction. That's how I would describe it.
And when you say free of friction, what do you mean by that? Because again, the meaning of when I say that may not match what you say. First, sweetheart, will you get me the blanket, please? Getting cold really easy.
So, do you want this instead of?
I'm okay. I was considering going and getting mine from my car.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll try not to dig too deep into
No, you're
any-
okay.
Yeah, it's chilly. Okay. You can smell that. Okay. Okay, so, yeah, what did you mean by friction? What does that mean for you?
The first thing that comes to mind is anxiety. That's what friction means for me. Just any sort of I don't know, adverse feeling, negative feeling, you know, a negative thought. Discomfort. That's friction. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I mean, I guess friction doesn't really have it's a pretty loosely worded question. Yeah, that's kind of it.
Okay. So perfect. So we've hovered at the same point that we left off at.
Okay.
So that's a nice blanket.
Yeah, I made it.
You made that?
Mhm.
Oh my god, can I touch it?
Yeah.
Look at that. It's awesome.
What is it made
She
of?
made that.
It's just yarn.
Oh, okay.
Really? Is that just yarn?
Yeah,
Or
it's
it feels
just,
like
it's just
some-
thick yarn.
Okay. Oh, so that's
Yeah.
one strand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
So
thick.
we were continuing on Darren's account of falling asleep and freedom from friction. Right? But you know, Daphne, you brought up a really interesting point about falling asleep, right? Which would be that it's populated by dreams or fantasies. And so, within those fantasies, do good things happen?
So let's see, like when I'm like before I fall asleep, yeah, most of the time good things are happening.
And when those good things happen, is there not somewhere the reality that, well, one, those things aren't happening? Or they're not really happening, right, in reality?
Sure, right.
And is there not also the awareness that that those things which you're fantasizing about, that fantasy must come to an end at some point?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I know that. While I'm doing it, while
Yeah.
I'm making these, yeah, I know it's...
On some level, right?
Right,
On some
yeah.
level, yeah. And then, so therefore, would it then be reasonable to say that perhaps when entertaining those fantasies, though there's the impression of release from the anxieties, from having to do stuff and so on, there's the impression which perhaps dominates the eye of the mind, which dominates your awareness, but that impression must be coupled with some sense of dread that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it would bear to reason that if that fantasy is not real, and the fantasy itself, regardless of its state of reality, must come to an end, that we have two major shitty pieces of news in the back closet, right?
I suppose.
I mean, I'm not trying to diss your pre-sleep fantasies.
I don't go that deep into it. My pre-sleep, like these, that's just playtime for me. Like, that's fun time. I know it's gonna end. I know it's just to help me sleep, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
But whatever its purpose, of course, does it not stand to reason that when one experiences something pleasurable, particularly if one indulges in something pleasurable, that the seeds of disappointment and dissatisfaction must fall? For example, if somebody were to say, here's a lollipop, Jess. I really like sugar. I can go to town on sugar, right? Hey Jess, here's a lollipop. And I take the lollipop and say, thank you, and put it in my mouth. And there's a sweetness in my mouth. Well, how long does that sweetness last? Roughly. Daffney, how long does that sweetness last? A lollipop.
As long as the lollipop is. It depends.
It sure does. But if we were to produce a random number which would be representative, it's not a trick question. Like how many minutes does a normal
A
lollipop
minute,
last?
because I just bite the shit out of them.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't even suck them. I just
Right. Yeah. So okay, let's say I'm like you. I am like you, actually. That's why we're friends, right? So I'm like you. If you give me a lollipop, I'll immediately bite it and chew it, and 20 seconds, right? Tops. So now my lollipop's gone, right? Well then, how do you think that will affect my emotional state if I lollipops please me and the pleasurable experience comes to an end? What then follows? What emotion typically follows by the laws of cause and effect? The removal of the pleasurable experience, or the departure.
You want us to say displeasure, like some sort
No,
of...
I don't want you to
gonna
say anything. I want you to say what you say.
Yeah, you're usually like, oh, what's going
Fuck my
now?
lollipop.
Yeah, fuck my lollipop, right?
Yeah, right.
Right. Okay. And so you can see how, in some way, this relates to, not directly, this has something to do with, if I were to conjure a fantasy about, I don't know, honestly, doing manual labor for a living, which is what I would like to do, right? Or, if I could be a carpenter, if I could be a carpenter, and I fantasize, I see the wood in front of me, or I could knit blankets. I would like to do that, right? If I could knit blankets all day, what a wonderful, and I see myself surrounded by blankets I made, and I give them to my friends, right? Do you do that? You give them away to your friends?
I've given, more family.
Yeah, right? I mean, you can only make so many a year, right? But the point is, if I were to make them and be surrounded by them and be somebody who had a lifestyle that centered around making blankets, then oh, that would be so wonderful. But of course, when I get up, I'm somebody who makes movies and rides a bicycle rickshaw. And so the state of transition between the fantasized, desirable state, which does not have substance, and the real state, which has a different, much more palpable type of substance, right? If you think about, if you think about having sex, and you have sex, those are two different experiences, right? They're different experiences. So likewise, the fantasies that take place before sleep, or during sleep, or during waking times, likewise are fundamentally different, but are similar with respect to the fact that they end. And so then, let's say I have a fantasy about something so wonderful, right? Like a hot air balloon ride, right? And then let's say there's something around me that's like a neutral thing, like, I have to walk to the store. Well, if I fantasize about a hot air balloon ride, right? How am I feeling in that fantasy? It's a really cool hot air balloon ride. How do I feel?
Excited.
Yeah, I'm like, this is like,
enthused.
woo, right? And I'm fantasizing here, I'm eating my lunch, right? I'm fantasizing hot air balloon. And then somebody's like, hey, your friend is like, hey, can you get me a drink? I go, yeah, sure. And I have to walk to get the drink. So how is the walk then different by the laws of cause and effect? If I were to be fantasizing about a hot air balloon ride before walking, or if I were to be fantasizing about being tortured in prison, right? In the hole. No, seriously. How does it feel to fantasize about being tortured in prison, generally, by an ordinary person? How does that feel, that fantasy?
Unpleasant.
Unpleasant, right? Okay.
Right.
So if I precede a neutral experience with an unpleasant experience, how does that affect the neutral experience? And if I precede an unpleasant experience with a positive fantasy experience, how does that affect the neutral experience? You see, right? So the point is that the fantasies one harbors before bed sow the seeds of the realities one experiences the following day. It's a very important point. It might be a core point of Jesism, actually, is that events and phenomena, experiences, connections, all these things, quilts, blankets, these are all actually, it sounds like hippie truism, but they're actually all quite profoundly connected. And so that no action in your life exists independent of another action in your life is of great importance. Whether somebody dropping a penny in Singapore affects like somebody sneezing in Russia is of less importance. But whether you helping an old lady across the street is helpful to her is of course of great importance. And whether you fantasize before sleep, which I would never condemn or anything like that, but you see, it's more complicated than it appears to be, because it sows the seeds of another time in the future. And so that sort of harks back again to the deceptive nature of life. It would seem that, this fantasy about sex, or this fantasy about food, or hot air balloons, or prison is, let's leave prison out, but these positive fantasies are harmless, right? But in fact, we can see that they have causes which are deceptive in their pattern of manifestation.
Possible for me to step away for just a second?
Yeah, do whatever you need.
I'm just really hungry, so I'm gonna get a pizza.
So this is something that I believe our view of our actions needs to have a more inclusive understanding. It's like seeing something from one side, but upon seeing it from another side, it has different characteristics, and another, and still another. And so these meditations we do are an effort to have a more inclusive, comprehensive view of what's around us, of our dreams, of what occurs before sleep, in the middle of the day, at the end of the day, and in our relationships with the work and things around us. And so that brings up a core point of Jesism, which is crosses over core point of Jesism, which is that reality is always better than fantasy at all times. There's never a time when fantasy is to be preferred over reality, from my point of view. And I'm not saying I'm right, I'm just saying consider it.
Is it though? What if you're homeless?
Right.
What if you're homeless, you don't have any money, you don't have a fucking girlfriend or husband or whatever, no family, no support system, no job, nothing, you don't have shit, you're homeless, you're broke, you're bummed. What if you I don't know, what if your only form of joy throughout the day is like when you are at the homeless shelter in the day room or in the community room and you get to play Xbox for 2 hours? What if that's not better than your reality? What if you get to play The Sims for 2 hours where you have a house and a family and a job? You know what I mean? Is that fabricated reality not better than that homeless person's reality? You know what I mean? Because some people view video games as, like escapism. You know what I mean? Is there a time where escapism might be better than
Living in the present?
Yeah, that's pretty much what we were just talking about.
So, just really quick, I brought up that fantasy, that reality is always better than fantasy as something closer to the core, right? And that his answer was that sort of, are there not times, such as being homeless and having nothing to do, when playing a video game would not be superior to the reality of being having leprosy, AIDS, being beaten every night, and being a junkie, right?
Right.
Okay. And so, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, not necessarily video games for me, but growing up, I thought I've had a decent childhood in comparison to some others, but it was pretty rough. Like the people that you work for got involved.
Okay.
I would read all the time as an escape, just because it was something to do and something to take my mind off of everything. I ended up escaping more to school. I became more involved in extracurriculars, got more of a social life, because it was either have a social life or be at home where everything sucked.
Right.
And I was young. I didn't know what good friends were, and growing up, I was always the friend who, everyone relied on and everyone would come to, but I was never invited to things. They would always come to me and be like, oh, hey, this is going on, could you be the mediator? But then, they'd go and have their fun, and because I'm the person of reason and the mediator, they wouldn't invite me because they didn't want the rational
make
person.
Up more things for you to mediate about.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a catch-22, because it's, you escape to these fantasies all the time, so you're not present in the real world, so the people in the real world sort of disconnect from you more. Or you're so involved in the here and now that you have struggles with escaping. Does that make sense?
Everything you're saying makes sense. However, I'm not sure. Can you? And I'm not contradicting what you're saying at all. But just can you share with us what you mean by problems related to being fixed in the present?
Well, a part of escape, everyone, even as you were saying, even before you're go to bed, you have your little fantasies.
Yeah.
The more involved you are in the present, the harder it is to fantasize about impractical things. In my case.
For most people, sure.
Yes. So, the more involved I was in my social groups, the more involved I was in my family, the more all of my thoughts only became centered around those people. So when, say before bed, I was thinking of, what would be the scenario that would be best?
Yeah.
It would always be about those people, and I couldn't have, a moment just like, what would it be like if I were to do something fantastical?
Wonderful. So you guys are really helping to bring the silt up to the surface, right? So what I would say is that what the two of you are saying demonstrates well what I said in the beginning about trying to articulate things that are very, very hard to understand. So you're pointing out that when I say reality, it's not exactly what you mean by reality. And so this is good because then we can bridge the gap, right? So the homeless person, there's a few things, okay? The homeless person is most likely in that position because he's a fantasizer to begin with. Say, there's plenty of homeless people who are born in good homes. And under the influence of not attending to reality as it is, so that's an important thing that I mean. It's not exactly what is normally called reality. What I'm discussing is attending to and being aware of reality as it is. So for example, this bottle is a component part of reality, most certainly. And so if I go about cradling this bottle and doing things to make the bottle happy and thinking about what's best for the bottle, then what has happened is I have departed from reality and entered into a fantasy where these people, or these bottles, or these fantasies, or these computer games carry within them special things that I can't get elsewhere. By having a particular kind of relationship, that gives me a special type of security because they either need me or what have you, that is worth letting go of reality as it is. That those fixations are a function, even a fixation on a person or a fixation on videos, right? Is to fixate at all or to attach is to depart from reality as it is. So these CEOs, some of them who are very rich and have a tremendous amount of influence in quote reality, have in fact departed dramatically from reality because they've taken a selection of items within reality, such as their company or their relationship or their knitting or whatever it may be, right? They've taken these and they've infused them with fantasy. It is the most important thing to, if I were to daydream all day about how I'd like to be a mason, which I really would, if I were to daydream about all that all day, then I would take the reality of a passing, temporary, changing, which we talked about, right? A changing phenomenon of a thought, which in a sense is real. I have taken that and I've fueled that and massaged it and nurtured it and fed it and entertained it until it's a full-blown, it has entered into a new stage of development. It's almost like a living thing. It's supposed to have a life cycle of about a millisecond, but we feed it and nurture it so it has a long life cycle. And the longer the life cycle and more elaborate its influence in our lives, the more we dwell in fantasy. So that it's possible to play The Sims in perfect reality, with perfect awareness of what is as it is. And it's possible to enable other people to misuse us, abiding by reality exactly as it is. But it so happens that those are overwhelmingly examples of either negating reality or of being in the middle of a process of affirming reality, but not quite being there yet. If you've affirmed reality and you're homeless, you will not play The Sims. You will not. You won't go get a job, right? Or you'll do whatever thing would be like that. And likewise, if you understand that you're a worthy, beautiful person who has a natural ability without any effort to attract people to them, then you don't go about trying to secure friendships with that kind of type of bartering, of role bartering, you know? And so, when I say fantasy, I don't exactly mean what the two of you mean. I mean something that includes sort of what you're saying and excludes it at the same time. So reality has to do with an adherence to what is. So then the question, and that's a core principle, I guess, of Jesism. Then the question is, what is, right? And so one characteristic that we've alluded to, but not exactly highlighted of what is that what is changing. I said a thought can take place for a microsecond, and that is part of reality. Or you can play a game such that you're attending to the overall panorama of sense contact and mental experiences, internal, physical, emotional experiences, and then you're playing reality as it is, or playing The Sims as it is. But that playing, to be abiding by what is, necessitates adherence, almost like to drape yourself very gently upon, just like drape my hands on my knee, on the fact that reality is changing. Right? And so that means that by conversely, anything which appears to be static or the same or reliable, you can knock on this table, that characteristic is a deception, is another deception. It's not that way. And this is even closer to the core of it all, is that the ultimate deception is you. And I see these things very clearly, not like intellectually. When I look in your eyes, and I look in my own eyes in the mirror, and the eyes of all the people around me, and the tables around me, that it's you. Getting in there, getting your hands on it. It's like an overambitious kid who wants to, there's a perfectly good sandcastle, and he wants to go in there like a really, tyrannical, crazy kid, and he wants to go fix it all. But he's abiding by a principle of reality wherein the castle is stuck that way, and it should be made a different way. And one of the principal mechanisms of that motivation is fantasy. We're going to do just one today.
Okay.
So, Enrique.
I was going to ask.
Yes, please.
Because I feel like we have definitely strayed very far away from the questions and gone on many, many tangents. But is there a way that you could succinctly?
Perfectly, yeah.
Wrap
So,
up,
I'm terrible at being succinct, obviously. So succinctly, our perception of reality is innately deceptive. It is not mildly deceptive, it is deceptive through and through. Freedom lies in abiding by what is as it is, and what is always characterized by change. Unsatisfactoriness and what is always as it is lacks us within it. There is no self in reality. That's my point of view. And that to navigate life in defiance of these realities is to live within a fantasy. And that's not as good as reality. You guys want to do one more or you want to call it?
That's it for me.
Okay. All right, let me say goodbye to the folks back home. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
For sure, that's super cool. I'm really glad I was able to get you. You're actually more, you're actually, I think, a better contribution than percent. So thank you. Yeah. And Darren, thanks for leading. All right. Peace out, y'all. So there you have it. Some of the, those are the core principles of Jesism, beating around the bush for 45 minutes and then nailing it right on the fucking head. Love you guys.